It was a cold Friday afternoon in Manhattan, New York. The streets were busy with the usual city rhythm, honking cars, rushing footsteps, and the distant hum of music from somewhere in the air. In the middle of that fast-paced world, a woman stepped out of the subway station, tightly holding a slightly worn leather bag. Her name was Elena Morales. She looked out of place. Her coat was old, not the fashionable kind seen on Fifth Avenue. Her shoes were practical, clean but clearly used for years. Her face was soft, kind, and determined. She wasn't there to shop or sightsee. She had a purpose, one that took her months to prepare for. Elena had grown up in a small town in Arizona. Her life wasn't easy. She raised her younger siblings alone after their mother passed and worked at a diner for most of her adult life. But she had always dreamed of starting her own food business, a cozy chain of Latin American cafes that serve homemade recipes her grandmother once made. This wasn't just a dream. She'd been planning, saving, learning, even taking online business courses at night. And now, after finally getting a meeting with a potential investor, she was standing in front of the Lancaster Grand Hotel, one of the most exclusive five-star hotels in the city. The investor was holding a private business brunch there. She was invited. She had the email printed and saved on her phone. Everything was confirmed. As she walked toward the grand marble entrance, she took a deep breath. The glass doors opened automatically. Inside, a tall doorman in a crisp navy uniform noticed her. He looked her up and down. Without even asking her name, he stepped forward and stopped her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, trying to stay polite. "This is a private property. Are you lost?" Elena smiled gently, reaching for her phone. "No, I have a meeting here. With Mr. Carson. He invited me. It's at the rooftop brunch hall." The doorman's smile faded slightly, replaced with a practiced stiffness. Another hotel staff member, a younger concierge, came over and joined him. The two exchanged looks. "I'm sorry, but we can't let you in without confirmation," the concierge said quickly, almost rehearsed. "Are you sure you're at the right place?" Elena held up the email again. "Yes, here's the message from Mr. Carson's assistant. I'm on the guest list." The concierge barely glanced at the screen. His eyes were on her bag, then her shoes, then her coat. A couple walked past behind her, well-dressed, laughing, holding hands. They were let in with smiles and warm greetings. "I think there's been a mistake," the doorman added. "This brunch is for business professionals and VIP clients. Perhaps you're looking for one of the cafes across the street." The words hit Elena like a slap. Her throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I am a business professional," she said quietly. But it was too late. A small crowd had started forming behind her. Some people looked away. Others watched with mild curiosity, as if she were a scene from a movie they didn't fully understand. "I've traveled from Arizona to be here. I was personally invited. Please don't judge me by how I look," she said again, now with more emotion. The concierge stepped back. "Ma'am, I'll have to ask you to leave if you can't verify your appointment properly." Elena didn't move. Not because she was being defiant, but because she was frozen in disbelief. She had done everything right. Saved money for the flight. Practiced her pitch. Printed her business plan. Dressed in the nicest clothes she had. And now a pair of strangers who didn't even check her name were pushing her out of the one chance she had waited a year for. Just then, a woman walked past the front doors, young, elegant, probably in her mid-30s, holding a sleek laptop bag. She paused as she noticed the exchange. Her eyes lingered on Elena. Then she turned to the doorman. "Is there a problem?" the woman asked, her voice calm but sharp. "No, just a misunderstanding," the concierge answered quickly. "She's not on the list." "I am," Elena said again, her voice cracking now. The woman narrowed her eyes and pulled out her phone. She tapped few buttons. After a few seconds, she looked up. "What's your name?" she asked Elena. "Elena Morales." The woman nodded. "You are on the list. Mr. Carson invited you personally. I'm his executive assistant." Silence. The doorman's face changed instantly. The concierge stepped back. The assistant looked at them both with clear disappointment. "You didn't even check the list?" she asked. "You just assumed." Neither of them answered. "Follow me, Ms. Morales," she said with a respectful nod. "You're already late." Elena followed, her heart pounding. As she stepped inside the luxury lobby, its floors sparkling, chandeliers glowing above, she felt 100 eyes on her back. Not because she was causing trouble, but because something powerful had just shifted in that space. She had arrived with hope. She had been turned away with judgment. But now she was walking in, not just as a guest, but as a woman whose dignity refused to be hidden. And the story was just beginning. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Elena stared at her reflection in the polished metal walls. She smoothed her coat with trembling hands and tried to steady her breathing. 100 thoughts raced through her mind, all screaming the same question: do I belong here? The assistant beside her, Claire, didn't say much during the ride up. She checked her phone, typed a message, then glanced over at Elena. "I'm sorry about what happened downstairs," she said softly. "It's not the first time that staff has made assumptions." Elena gave a weak smile. "It's okay. I'm used to people underestimating me." Claire tilted her head. "You shouldn't have to be." The elevator dinged, and the doors opened to a stunning rooftop lounge. The sunlight filtered through tall glass panels. A live jazz band played softly in the background. Guests sat at elegant tables draped in white linen, sipping champagne and laughing in tailored suits. A buffet lined with gourmet dishes sparkled behind crystal displays. Waiters moved gracefully, almost invisible. Elena hesitated on the threshold. Claire led the way, weaving between tables. People looked up, some politely curious, others clearly surprised by Elena's modest appearance. She felt every glance like a pin against her skin. At the far end of the terrace, seated at a round table with a view of Central Park, sat a tall man in a charcoal suit. His back was straight, posture precise, his hair silver at the temples. This was Henry Carson, the investor. Claire leaned in. "That's him. And don't worry. He's not as intimidating as he looks." Elena walked forward with careful steps, clutching the strap of her bag. Her heart thundered. She wasn't afraid of failing. She was afraid of not even getting the chance. "Mr. Carson," Claire said, approaching the table. "This is Elena Morales, the one you asked to meet." Carson turned. His face was unreadable, cool, alert, but not unkind. "Elena," he said, standing up and offering his hand. "I'm glad you made it." She shook his hand. His grip was firm, but not harsh. "I'm very sorry for being late," she said quickly. There was a bit of confusion at the entrance. He nodded slightly. "I heard. Let's not worry about that now. Please sit." She slid into the chair, placing her bag gently on her lap. Claire gave her a reassuring look before walking off to take a call. Mr. Carson poured water into her glass himself, then folded his hands on the table. "So," he began, "you're the woman who sent me the handwritten business proposal in a manila envelope. I can't remember the last time I got something like that." Elena flushed. "I didn't know if email would reach you. I thought paper might stand out." "It did," he said with a faint smile. "Tell me, Elena, why cafes?" She straightened. This was her moment. She wasn't going to waste it. "I grew up in a very small town," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "We didn't have much, but every Sunday my grandmother would make tamales and coffee. Everyone in the neighborhood would stop by, not just for the food, but for the feeling. That table was warmth, community, safety. I want to build that feeling in cities where people have money but no time, where they miss home but don't know what that tastes like anymore." Carson didn't interrupt. He watched her carefully, listening. "I've tested recipes for 3 years," she continued. "I've run a small weekend stall. I know how to manage costs, hire help, even handle customer complaints. But I don't have the capital to open a physical location. That's why I wrote to you." He leaned back, his fingers steepled under his chin. "You have no formal training, no big city restaurant experience, and you've never managed more than a part-time stall," he said. "You do understand what kind of risk that is, right?" Elena didn't flinch. "Yes. But I also know people who went to culinary school and still can't make a decent cup of coffee. Passion doesn't always follow degrees." He almost smiled at that. A waiter came by and offered her champagne. She politely declined and asked for tea instead. Carson raised an eyebrow, impressed by the choice. He said, "Most people come to me with slick PowerPoint presentations, digital portfolios, and flashy numbers. You brought a printed menu and a handwritten cover letter." "I figured you've seen enough of the other kind," Elena said. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked out toward the skyline. "Years ago," he said slowly, "I invested in a little donut shop in Brooklyn. Everyone told me it would fail. The owner barely spoke English. But she had a recipe that reminded me of my grandmother. That shop now has 7 locations." Elena stayed silent, not wanting to interrupt whatever thought was forming. "I'll tell you what," Carson said finally, turning back to her. "I'm not ready to hand over a check just yet. but I want to taste your food. Elena blinked. You mean now? No. Tomorrow. Bring me your best 3 items. No catering tricks. Just you, your ingredients, and what you can carry. Cook it yourself. No second chances. She nodded. I will. He stood, offering his hand again. I'll have my assistant send you the location. Don't be late. And Elena. Yes. I don't care what they wear at the door. I care what they bring to the table. She smiled for the first time in hours. I'll bring everything I've got. The next morning, Elena stood in the tiny kitchen of a rented Airbnb in Queens, her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied in a tight bun. The kitchen wasn't fancy, no industrial-grade equipment, no team of assistants, no stocked pantry. Just her, a bag of groceries she had carefully selected, and the quiet hum of a city still waking up. Today was the day she would cook for Henry Carson. She had spent the entire night mapping out her game plan, 3 dishes that captured the heart of her grandmother's cooking, refined for a modern palate. Every choice mattered, the spice level, the texture, even the plating. She wanted these dishes to speak for her, to tell the story that words couldn't. The menu was simple. Tamales de elote, sweet corn tamales with a hint of cinnamon and honey, steamed in husks like her grandmother used to make. Chicken mole tacos, rich, dark mole sauce from scratch, paired with marinated chicken thighs on homemade tortillas. Abuela's Café con Leche, not just coffee, but her grandmother's secret blend with cinnamon bark, orange zest, and a touch of cocoa. She had practiced these dishes so many times she could make them blindfolded. But today wasn't about practice. Today was about heart. As she unwrapped the husks and mixed the masa dough, her mind drifted to her childhood kitchen. Her abuela's hands guiding hers, correcting her grip on the wooden spoon. The smell of spices thick in the air. The laughter of her little brothers playing in the next room. Those memories weren't just nostalgia, they were the reason she was here. By noon, the tiny apartment was filled with warm, fragrant steam. Elena had cleaned every plate and wiped every edge of the counter. She packed the dishes carefully in a soft cooler bag, layered with towels to keep the heat in. No catering trays. No plastic containers. Just her food, the way it was meant to be served. Her phone buzzed. Claire, Mr. Carson's assistant. Test begins at 1 p.m. Address is 22 West 18th Street. 2nd floor. Ring bell twice. Elena replied instantly. On my way. She checked herself once more in the mirror. Same coat, same shoes, but this time, she walked with her shoulders higher. She wasn't here to impress anyone with appearance. She was here to remind them that greatness doesn't need a costume. By 12:45, she stood in front of a nondescript brownstone building tucked between an art gallery and a bookstore. The only thing identifying the address was a small silver number near the buzzer. She pressed the bell twice. A minute later, Claire opened the door, smiling. Right on time. Elena stepped inside, careful not to spill anything. The building smelled of old wood and lavender. The 2nd floor landing led to an open space that looked more like a loft than a test kitchen. It had a wide table in the center, a small stove in the corner, and natural light flooding through large windows. Mr. Carson was already there, seated at the table with a notebook and a bottle of water. You came alone, he said, observing her bag. I always cook alone, she replied. He gestured to the space. You have 1 hour. Make it count. Elena set up quickly, unpacking each dish with care. The mole simmered gently on a small burner. She unwrapped the tamales and re-steamed them for 5 minutes to restore their softness. She hand-pressed tortillas on a wooden board she had brought from home. The scent of chocolate, spice, and roasted corn began to fill the room. Mr. Carson watched in silence, occasionally making notes. Halfway through the hour, just as she was plating the tamales, the door opened again. 3 people walked in, a younger man in a gray blazer, a woman in a floral dress, and an older gentleman with a chef's apron tied around his waist. Elena's hands froze for a second. These are my colleagues, Carson said. I trust my palate, but I never invest without a second opinion. Elena swallowed hard and nodded. The chef approached the counter. I'll be judging your flavor, technique, and originality. Hope you're ready. She took a breath. I am. Each dish was plated with care. The tamales were served with a thin honey drizzle and dusted cinnamon. The tacos were garnished with pickled red onions and a smear of mole on the side. The coffee was poured in ceramic mugs she brought from Arizona. No takeout cups, no branding, just warmth. The judges ate slowly, saying nothing at first. Then came the questions. Why corn tamales instead of savory ones? Because the sweetness reminds people of home. It's not overwhelming, it's comfort food. You made your own mole. Why not by paste like most chefs? Because shortcuts cut out culture. And I'm not selling efficiency. I'm selling memory. They moved on to the coffee. The older chef took a sip and paused, letting the flavor sit. He set the cup down and nodded slowly. I haven't tasted coffee like this in 20 years, he said. One by one, the judges gave subtle signs of approval. Even the younger woman, who had been stiff at first, smiled as she tasted the tacos. After a few final bites, Carson leaned back in his chair. You cook like someone who has nothing to prove but everything to protect, he said. Elena's eyes glistened. I'm not doing this for fame. I'm doing it because I don't want the recipes that raised me to die in silence. He closed his notebook. I'm going to need one more night to think, he said. But I'll say this now, what you've brought here today is more than food. It's soul. Elena nodded, her heart racing. Thank you for the chance. As she packed her things, the older chef approached her. If you don't get the investment, he said quietly, come find me. My restaurant could use someone who still cooks from the heart. She smiled. I'll keep that in mind. But I've come this far, on belief. I think I'll go just a little further. Elena returned to her apartment late in the afternoon, physically exhausted but emotionally lighter than she had been in weeks. Her bag was nearly empty now, except for a few napkins and the handwritten checklist she had used to organize her prep. She placed it gently on the small table by the window, beside an old photo of her grandmother holding a tray of tamales. The sun was just beginning to set, casting warm orange light over the floor. Elena didn't know what Carson would decide. She had no illusions. He had likely seen 100 dreamers. She wasn't naive enough to think good food alone could carry a business. But deep inside, beneath the nerves and fatigue, was a small but steady hope. She turned off her phone and let the silence wrap around her like a blanket. The next morning, the city was already roaring outside by the time she woke. Her phone had buzzed several times during the night, but she hadn't checked it yet. When she finally picked it up, the first thing she saw was a message from an unknown number. Henry Carson. Meet me today. 3 p.m. same location. There was no greeting, no emoji, no hint of the decision. Just a time and a place. Her stomach nodded. She forced herself to eat breakfast, but barely tasted the toast. She wore the same coat. It felt like armor now. At 2:55, she stood once again in front of the brownstone building. The same silver number glinted in the light. She pressed the bell twice. Claire answered the door with a smile that didn't give anything away. He's waiting inside. When Elena entered the loft, she saw that the wide table was cleared now. Just 2 chairs, a folder, and 2 cups of coffee sat in the center of the room. Mr. Carson stood by the window, hands in his pockets. He turned as she approached. You were brave yesterday, he said. Not just in what you served, but in how you stood there. You didn't try to become someone else. That takes more discipline than people realize. She stayed quiet, her hands lightly clasped in front of her. I didn't sleep much, he continued. I was up reading every note you wrote in that proposal. I even tried making one of the dishes myself, based on your instructions. Elena raised an eyebrow. Did it come out okay? Terribly. Burned the sauce. But I got what you meant. I could feel the care in it. That's rare. He walked over to the table and slid the folder toward her. I'm offering you $50,000 to launch your first location. No strings other than honesty and hard work. I'll mentor you through the build. You'll retain control of the brand, but I'll have a stake in future expansion. Elena stared at the folder. Her hands didn't move. This is real, she asked quietly. He nodded. I wasn't sure until I saw how the chef responded. Or the waitress from a building next door who wandered in to try your coffee. She said it reminded her of Sunday mornings in Caracas. That sealed it for me. Tears threatened to form in her eyes. She blinked quickly. I don't even know what to say. Say yes. And then let's get to work. She reached for the folder with trembling fingers. The paper felt thick, solid, real. She signed on the last page. As she handed the pen back, Carson looked her in the eyes. By the way, I called the hotel where they refused to let you in. Asked if they knew what kind of judgment their staff was using. She looked surprised. You didn't have to do that. I did. Because next time someone like you walks in, I want them to think twice before deciding who belongs. She smiled and shook his hand. Thank you. Not just for the investment, but for seeing me. By the following week, Elena's life had already started to change. Claire connected her with a contractor who specialized in small restaurant builds. Carson introduced her to a real estate broker who helped her scout spaces in Lower Manhattan. She started a business account, hired an accountant, and filed paperwork for a proper LLC. But something else happened that she hadn't expected. One of the judges from the tasting, the young woman in the floral dress, posted about the experience on her blog. She wrote, "I met a woman who reminded me why food is sacred. She wasn't polished. She wasn't trendy. But she brought tears to my eyes with a cup of coffee and a story about her grandmother. We need more women like Elena in business. We need fewer velvet ropes and more open kitchens." The post went viral. People started messaging Elena from all over the country, asking when her cafe would open, offering encouragement, and sharing their own family food stories. She was overwhelmed, but not afraid. She had walked through a door that had once been slammed in her face. Now she was holding it open for others. 6 months later, the cafe was finally ready. It wasn't large, just a single-floor space nestled between a laundromat and a used bookshop in the Lower East Side. The walls were painted a soft terracotta. Framed photos of Elena's family hung near the entrance. Handmade ceramic mugs lined open wooden shelves. The scent of cinnamon, roasted peppers, and fresh masa clung to every corner. The sign above the door read, "Abuela's Table." Opening day arrived with more guests than anyone had expected. The sidewalk outside was filled with people, some holding printouts of the blog post that had gone viral, others just curious about the story they had seen trending under hashtags like #Dignity in an Apron and #Elena Cooks from the Heart. Inside, Elena stood behind the counter, wearing a clean white apron and the same gold earrings her grandmother had given her on her 15th birthday. She hadn't changed her recipe. She hadn't added any trendy items to the menu. She made the same tamales, the same mole, and the same coffee. And people came not just to eat, but to feel something. Around noon, Claire walked in, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers and a big grin. "This place smells like memory," she said, setting the flowers on the counter. "Congratulations." Elena gave her a warm hug. "I couldn't have done this without you." A moment later, Mr. Carson entered behind her, wearing a dark blazer over jeans. He looked around, took a deep breath, and nodded. "You made it yours." Elena smiled. "It was always mine. I just didn't have the key yet." The cafe buzzed with voices and music. A local jazz duo played in the corner. People shared tables. Strangers complimented one another's food. Children scribbled drawings on the paper menus while their parents sipped café con leche with cinnamon steam rising from the cups. But then, something unexpected happened. Around 3 p.m., a woman appeared in the doorway. Her coat was crisp. Her makeup perfect. It was the same hotel manager who had turned Elena away months ago. She hesitated before stepping in, her heels clicking softly on the tile floor. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the packed tables and the long line at the counter. Elena recognized her instantly. Their eyes met. The woman stepped forward and paused. "I didn't come to cause a scene," she said quietly. "I saw the article. I recognize your photo." Elena remained calm. "Are you here for coffee or for closure?" The woman let out a shaky breath. "Both, I think." Elena nodded. "Take a seat. I'll bring it to you." She returned a few minutes later with a warm mug. She placed it gently on the table, along with a sweet corn tamale on a ceramic plate. The woman looked down at the food, her voice catching. "I misjudged you." "Yes," Elena said softly. "You did, but I didn't come here to prove anything to you. I built this so women like me wouldn't have to explain themselves again." The woman looked ashamed but grateful. "Thank you for letting me in." Elena gave her a small smile. Everyone deserves a second chance. Word of the encounter spread quickly. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No revenge. Just a quiet moment of dignity, offered freely, without bitterness. And that, more than anything, became the symbol of what her cafe stood for. By that evening, a local news crew showed up to interview Elena. The journalist asked her what made this cafe different from others. She answered simply, "We don't just serve food here. We serve stories. Everyone who walks through that door brings one with them, and everyone leaves with a little more hope than they came in with." The cafe remained full until closing. As she locked up for the night, Elena looked out at the city lights. She thought of her grandmother, of the old kitchen in Arizona, of the night she stood outside that hotel with her food and her fear. She had been denied entry to a luxury hotel, but in the end, she'd built something better. Her own front door, her own table, her own story, and everyone was welcome,